I'm Stace and this is Bo, my 2018 Ducati SuperSport S. He turned 5 this month and it seemed like a pretty good reason to do a long-term ownership review. It won't be a features and specs review. There are a lot of videos like that already on this bike and a few of them have influenced my decision to get him in the first place. So this will be more a review of my experience with the bike, which I've had for nearly 3 years, got him secondhand. So if you're thinking of getting a secondhand 939 or the very similar 950, or you're a new owner of either of those, hopefully there'll be some tips in this video for you. So I was out cycling one day with some friends and went past a service station and saw this model of bike, and it was love at first sight. So I started researching and ended up hiring one for a weekend actually to see what it was like. And by the Friday of that same week, I owned this one. He already had the name Bo, so I kept it. It was secondhand. I got him on Friday the 13th in November of 2020. He already had just over 7,000 kilometres on him, and since then I've added probably another 32 or 33,000. So by his 5th birthday, he's probably going to reach about 40,000 kilometres. So I've learned a lot about this bike. I've had a few little problems that needed to be fixed and made a few little mods as well. But I definitely figured out what I love most about it and what I don't like so much about it. I've learned a lot from the Ducati SuperSport 939 forum, and I've linked to that below this video in the description. That's an amazing group of owners of this bike around the world, all different styles of riders, and very willing to share what they've learned as well. For me, getting this bike was absolutely the right decision. To this day, I still cannot think of another motorbike I would rather have or rather be riding instead of this one. For you, I hope my experiences help you learn more about the bike and appreciate it too. So like I said, I'm not going to do the full specs for this bike. You can find that anywhere. But just as a really, really quick intro, the engine is a 937cc twin. Power is 83-ish kilowatts and 110 horsepower at 9,000 RPM, and torque is 96, 97-ish Newton meters and 71 foot-pounds, I think that is, and that peaks at 6,500 RPM. Now, Bo is the S model, so he has fully adjustable Öhlins forks, and also a fully adjustable shock as well. Also comes with the quick shifter, which I'm pretty sure you can get as an option for the non-S model anyway, and the seat cowl. I think the 950 comes out with both of those standard now. I'm not quite sure. In a nutshell, I would describe the SuperSport as a bit of a unicorn. It's a sport bike, but it's a sport bike you can ride all day, every day. Now, I haven't taken him to the track, probably won't, but plenty of people have, and it's fun enough, I'm told. How you ride it though depends on your experience, and I am not that experienced. I started motorcycling on dirt bikes a few years ago now, and only really started riding on the street about 5 years ago, and my first street bike was a Ducati Scrambler, the little baby 62 400cc. So I'm not a good enough rider yet to, or maybe I won't ever be, to find the limits of the SuperSport. But I do love practicing technique and honing skill and really just getting to know the bike more and more and enjoying it, really. Most of the riding I do is probably days out really with friends, so that can be 3 to 6 hours of riding. Sometimes overnighters like we're about to do now, and this overnighter will be a little bit of the backdrop for the rest of this review video. And I often go out for practice rides, just short 1 or 2 hour rides through twisties, and really just have fun. And the SuperSport for all of those types of activities is just sublime. Let's start with what I don't like so much about this bike and just get it out of the way, because honestly it's really just a few niggles that this bike has for me. But I don't know, doesn't every bike have niggles? Anyway, for me there are 5 of them. One is this quick shifter. Different owners have had different issues with it. False neutrals when using it, particularly shifting down, has happened occasionally, but I think since I've been riding the bike and keeping the revs higher, sort of mostly around the 5k ballpark, the quick shifter seems to work flawlessly. I haven't had it fault at that point, so I think keeping the revs higher is the key for that. Heat on a hot day too. I mean, the rear header comes out right under the seat and you feel it on your thighs and you feel it on your butt. But what I've done to deal with that is, hopefully the glare on this isn't too much, but that is just a bit of heat shield I got from an auto parts store, and I just cut it out to fit underneath the seat. What is that? It's probably a fiberglass or something. And that in summer works brilliantly, but it's winter here now in the southern hemisphere and I am enjoying the warmth that he gives me, especially on those 1 or 2 degree mornings. The clutch is also a little bit grabby when he's cold. Generally what I'll do is definitely let the motor warm up a bit first thing in the morning, and just kind of warm up the clutch plates a little bit, get some oil all through him, I suppose, and that seems to help. I had a few occasions where I would stall it at first takeoff in the mornings, but I haven't been doing that for a while, so I think that technique seems to be working. Like with a lot of these bikes, neutral can be really hard to find when you come to a stop, but to be honest, I rarely put him in neutral. Just come to a stop, shut him off and keep him in first gear, and I don't know, to me that's like just an extra safety park brake. There are vibrations in this bike, it's a twin after all, and through the bars that can be quite difficult on the hands, I think, especially when you're kind of riding all day. So what I have, as you can see here, is some aftermarket bar ends. And they are Sato Racing stainless steel bar ends, and right up inside the bar there's also an inner weight as well, and that has done wonders to take the vibrations out of the bars. For the mirrors, I've got a whole other video on this. I've just got a bit of rubber around between the housing and the actual mirror itself to help take some of the vibrations out of that, but that's not perfect. The only other issue with the bike has been the rear brake. Again, I think it's because the rear brake lines and the fluid therefore runs close to where the heat is on that rear header, and it fades after a while, so I think the brake fluid just doesn't stand up to the heat. I use the rear brake mostly to come to smooth stops at traffic lights. I hate it when you pull up at traffic lights or stop and the forks dip. So a nice smooth stop. And also sometimes I just feel like the rear brake helps a little bit with slow speed manoeuvres and a bit of stability, and to level out the bike a little bit into some corners. So I just get that bled once a year. I'll probably start doing it myself, but that's just an issue. Front brake, no problems at all. It's excellent. But yeah, that's just probably because of the heat, that rear brake. Now, to me, these are really just quirks of the bike, part of its temperament, if you like, but they have been enough to put some people off, so be aware of them. Not me. I love everything else about this bike too much for those things to bother me at all. Now, over the nearly 3 years that I've had this bike, 6 mostly little things, have gone wrong. One thing is the ignition key barrel. That got a little bit sticky, so it was really hard to turn the key all the way around to lock. And really all that fixed that was I put a bit of, I don't think it was WD-40, I can't remember, but a tiny bit of water displacing lubricant in there. It's been 2 years since I did that, and it's just not stuck at all since then. That's been great. Another problem that happened was wiring under the tank. So I was out riding and suddenly the ABS light came on saying that it had failed, and my speedo stopped working, and obviously the odometer and trip meter stopped turning over. That took a while to figure it out. At first we thought maybe the reluctor wheel had a problem with it, or the ABS pickup thing. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember all the parts down there, but something may be wrong back here. But as it turned out, it was a wire under the tank that had been rubbing on a seam or some part of the underside of the tank. I had a tech do this, so I didn't actually see it. But he just fixed the wiring up and protected it from it happening again, and not a problem since. That's been fine. Another problem, and this is not the bike's fault, where the front sprocket cover bolts on, where that particular bolt there goes through onto the casing, that the part of the casing that it screws into had been cracked, and my theory or my suspicion is that a previous mechanic had maybe used an impact to do up the bolts when they might have been servicing it and cracked it. It's been fixed with helicoil, and it's been holding fine ever since. Another problem, and this is pretty common with this bike, it's pretty common with a lot of bikes from what I understand, is the exhaust servo motor, valve inside the cat. They stick. So you'll get your check engine light come on. Mine got stuck, and I kind of got, well, the servo motor's not under there anymore, but I got some lubricant and cleaner, and I cleaned up the cable, I cleaned up all of the moving parts, and it lasted, the check engine light went out, and it lasted for 6 more months, and then the check engine light came back on again. So I had a look underneath there, and the cable had actually completely broken through, the cable that joins the servo motor through to that exhaust valve. So I did what a lot of people do, and I took the servo motor out, I took the cable off, and I replaced that with a servo buddy, or a servo eliminator. I've got a whole video on that too, on how I did it. In fixing that the first time, these catalytic converter cover bolts weren't the best. These aren't the ones that came with the bike. They're gone, because especially the one that's up underneath, where is it? Up underneath there, they corroded, and I had to cut a slot in that bolt to get it out with a blade screwdriver. I've replaced them now. I wanted to get some nice stainless steel ones, but this is all I had floating around that would fit. I'll get to that one day, I guess. The only other thing that's happened, I haven't fixed it yet, is that in this radiator cover, that little insert for the bolt down in there, the rubber kind of tore, and so it's not holding it in anymore. So this is just flapping free, and I'll have to order another one of those from Ducati, which won't be too expensive. And that's the sum of the things that have gone wrong with this bike. There are other faults that owners have reported about on the 939 forum. A few that come to mind is the fuel sender in the tank stops working. I don't rely on mine. I have always relied on a trip meter to know when I need to refuel. So that hasn't, if that happens to this bike, which it hasn't, it's not going to bother me. Another one is the side stand bolts seem to have work themselves out for some people, and there have been a couple of drops from people not realising and the side stand not taking the weight of the bike, and down it goes. So they get regularly checked, but I haven't encountered mine as coming loose at all yet. This is where the SuperSport 939 forum has been so amazing, is you get to learn about these things, you get to learn how to fix them, and just be aware that they could happen. So consequently, I now carry a certain set of tools with me when I'm going, particularly on road trips. When the check engine light came on the first time, I kind of suspected it might have something to do with the servo motor because I'd read about it, so I didn't freak out. And I was able just to quickly, pull up, get off the bike, have a look, and confirm that that was indeed the problem. And I think it's fair to say, after 5 years, little things are going to happen with a motorbike that gets used as much as this does. And I've taken him on really rough, disgusting country roads, dirt roads, and he has hit a few potholes. He's sort of been out there in the elements, rain, wind, hot sun, all of those things. So I would not expect him to still be in showroom condition now, although I think he's not far from it.
So the road trip's begun. We are blasting up the highway just to get the first little bit done, have some brunch, and then back roads from there, which will be lovely. So I have made a bunch of little mods to the bike, I guess, since I've owned it. It also had a few when I got it, like this huge, how do you pronounce that? If someone can tell me, that would be great. I can't find it anywhere how to pronounce it, but this huge Puig shield. I remember very clearly the day I bought Bo and rode him back down this very highway, actually. And I'd never ridden a fared bike before, or one with a screen, and I couldn't believe how much more protection I had from the wind and just how stable it felt at speed compared to my little scrambler, which was a case of always being buffeted around. So yeah, Bo came with that huge screen. He also came with some Ducati bar risers. I took them out, I just feel more comfortable without them, but I've kept them because I think when I get older I may need them. And he also came with a Evotech, I think, radiator guard. Some of the first mods that I did when I got him were really because of my size, being a little bit smaller and shorter. I got the Ducati lowered seat. I also got these Pato shorty levers, which are also adjustable, so that I have a little bit better reach. I love these levers, actually. It's just nice. I mean, generally only use two fingers on the brake and maybe 3 fingers on the clutch, and keep a little bit more contact with the bar. Now, because of my height and because of the weight of the bike, I also decided to get some frame protection, Ducati frame sliders, and also for the front axle as well. They've already proven their worth, unfortunately. On my little scrambler, I always did car park practice, and I could do U-turns on that thing inside of 2 car parking spaces. And I boldly thought that I'd be able to do the same on the SuperSport, and I was wrong. Whoa, shit. I tried a very tight U-turn and didn't make it, and down he went. Very embarrassing. Also, for my stature, the bike's default suspension settings were just too stiff for me. I would ride him through corners and I almost felt like he was trying to buck me off. So I got Dave Moss to help me set it up for my weight and for my riding style, and oh my god, did that make a difference. That was amazing. Just felt so much more settled in the corners. And also adjusting the preload on the shock particularly meant that when I sat on the bike, it actually sagged a little bit and I could touch the ground a bit better. The day that I rode Bo home, I got home and was horrified to see that my jacket zipper had marked the tank a little bit. So I did get a Ducati tank protector. Now, I live in the subtropics, but that does not mean that winter is toasty warm. Some of the mornings where I live can be down to 1-2 degrees Celsius. That's pretty cold for me. So heated grips were another investment that I made. Oh my goodness, that was close. Heated grips. The heated grips are the Ducati OEM heated grips. I did a video on installing these and I kind of explained why I take them off at the end of each winter and put them back on at the beginning of each winter. To match the Evotech radiator guard, I got an oil cooler guard. When I took a look at the damage that oil cooler was getting, so I did get the oil cooler guard, and it's been great, but it does tend to catch the stones that I have to kind of gouge out or flick out every time I give Bo a bath. I already introduced you to the Sato weighted stainless steel weighted bar ends and inner bar weights. That was a really good investment for the vibrations, or to reduce them I should say. I also got an Evotech tail tidy just for aesthetics, also partly because of the vibrations through my feet. I replaced the stock foot pegs with, again, how do you say it, Puge, nice billet foot pegs that have got a little bit of a rubber pad on them, I guess. It also has a little bit more grip. The OEM ones I found were quite slippery as well. I don't ever take a pillion, so I took the pillion pegs off, and in a way I wished I'd left them on, because that day that I dropped Bo in front of the cafe, I also scratched the covers on the cans, so I think if I'd had the pillion pegs still on, maybe they would have taken the brunt of that drop. I also changed the front sprocket from the standard 15 tooth to a 14 tooth. That makes this bike so much easier to manage at low revs and therefore low speeds around town. Takeoffs are smoother and quicker, and I like the extra acceleration that you get from it as well. These bikes have a tiny bit of slop in the throttle. I don't know if other bikes have that. I haven't ridden many other bikes at all, so I don't know. And there's a little mod you can do that I learned from the 939 forum, where you just use a bit of heat shrink around some lugs just to take up that slop, and I really love that. I haven't done it on these heated grips yet. I may still do that, but I like that more direct throttle feel. Again, just for aesthetics, when he was due for a new chain, I gave him a gold one, the S-Yacht chain, and a S-Yacht sprocket as well, rear sprocket. I didn't change the ratio on the rear sprocket, that's all good. I'm not modifying the exhaust, I'll let you know, because where I live, the police have a very stringent crackdown on noise levels of motorcycles in particular. I like the way he sounds as he is anyway. I'm not going to spend $2,000 just to make him louder. I'd rather spend that $2,000 on a new exhaust for the V8 that I'm building for my Holden, old school Holden 1-tonner. Trixie, also on this channel. I think in future, some of the mods that I might make, one is to convert Bo to have a hydraulic clutch, and then also get the clear clutch cover, which I think is the grooviest thing. Before I even owned a motorcycle, I saw a Panigale at a service station that had the clear clutch cover, and it was just captivating. So I would love to do that in the future. And maybe add a bit of carbon, a black carbon belly pan, and maybe a carbon rear hugger, I don't know, not too much carbon, just a bit to kind of refresh him, I guess, because he's 5 years old now. He's just going to get older and look a little bit more worn. So that's just a thought I have about freshening him up. But I'm in no rush to do that. Doesn't matter where I pull up with this motorbike, at a service station, at a cafe, on the side of the road, at a park, whatever. If there are people around, they look at him, they come up and talk about him, they admire him. These bikes get a lot of attention because of how beautiful they are, really. As far as tyres are concerned, he's on his third set of Pirelli Rosso 3s. I like them. I don't know that I could be bothered trying a different tyre. This tyre is a really popular one for this bike. It came out of the factory with them, and a lot of owners that I can tell still prefer them. I think they're discontinued now, so the next set of shoes that Bo gets will be Rosso 4s, I think, which are pretty similar anyway. Just an evolution of the Rosso 3s as I understand it. So sitting on this highway and not being able to look at my checklist, I'm pretty sure that's the extent of the changes and mods that I've made to Bo. The quick shifter has been great since I've been riding the bike with a higher rev range, so to like 4 grand minimum, mostly up around 5. The quick shifter hasn't failed me up or down, but one thing I always avoid, apart from using it at lower revs like around town, is I avoid using it between first and second. That the quick shifter going from first up to second, even when I'm revving it, just feels too harsh. So I much prefer to clutch that one. But it's buttery smooth otherwise. So even with the 14-tooth front sprocket, I still rarely ever use 6th gear. Where I live, 100, 110 kilometers an hour is sort of the maximum speed limits, and speed limits are pretty heavily enforced, so going way above that is really just asking for trouble. So I rarely use 6th gear, even up to like 110, 120 on a really remote country road. I'm still in 5th. And that sort of sees the bike revving sort of 5, somewhere between 5 and 6. I can't quite remember. It's probably closer to 6 grand. What I found fascinating when I changed to keeping the bike at higher revs is I got better fuel economy, which kind of sounds counterintuitive. Higher revs, drinking more fuel maybe, but no. When I was keeping the revs sort of around 3 to 4 grand, I'd probably get maybe 300 kilometers out of a tank. But now that the revs are kind of higher, I'm getting closer to like 320, and sometimes even, based on calculations anyway, when I go to the fuel station, 320, 330 out of a tank. So it's definitely better for this engine definitely prefers higher revs. I wished I'd known that earlier, actually. One thing this bike really loves is sweepers. Nice long open curves you just don't have to slow down for. Eats them up. These bikes have pretty strong engine braking too, and for me, being as inexperienced as I am, it's something it's probably been the steepest learning curve for me is gear selection downhill through twisties, because the engine braking just is so strong. So yeah, I'm still trying to perfect that and finesse it. I ride it in sport mode because I don't know, it might have just been a fluke. I can't really think of any technical reason why this is the case, but it almost feels like the engine braking is not as harsh in sport mode. I haven't done a proper experiment to prove that. If you know better or know why, then please share in the comments. But I also like the responsiveness of the throttle in sport mode, and that's really the only difference between sport and touring. It's a little bit gusty out here, and that's something I do notice with a fared bike. So if you get a side wind, be ready for it. But stability is one of this bike's strengths too. Whether it's pushing through wind or riding on very rough roads. So where I live in Australia, we've had so much flooding over the last few years that the road's been as bad as having sections completely washed out and having to ride across road base or dirt. Or having a lot of potholes, or even the repaired potholes can sometimes be a bit dodgy. So when I have to slow down and sort of work my way through really rough roads or unsealed roads, and I have taken him on very loose gravel roads too by mistake, his stability at lower speeds is such a strength. He's no dirt bike, don't get me wrong. But he's more capable than I thought he would be on anything less than lovely tarmac. There are a bunch of things I love about this SuperSport. One of them is just how it looks. I mean, that's how I fell in love with it when I first saw it. It's kind of a zen design, you know. It's not flashy. It's just kind of stylish, really. I just love the way Ducati have designed this and all their bikes, really. I love the way it handles. And I'm pretty sure if I was a better rider, I'd really love the way it handles. But for a relatively heavy bike, I guess, at 210 kilos, it tips in really easily and smoothly, and it just rails the corners. Always seems to hold a steady line, and it doesn't need, like, I never have to fight with it. It's more about me learning how to relax and let the bike do the work. I love how it sounds at idle. I like the Desmo valve clatter. I love the exhaust note. I love it through the entire rev range, how it sounds. I love how comfortable it is. It really is a sport bike you can ride all day, which is what I'll be doing today and what I'll be doing tomorrow with my friend up ahead there, who is also on a SuperSport, by the way, not the S model, but a 2018 939. The seat is super comfortable. I never, ever get a sore butt. The bars, the clip-ons are not at that low sport bike kind of angle. They're a little bit raised, so I never get that wristy feeling that people talk of. I could probably handle the pegs being, the foot pegs being a little bit higher, because my knees, because I'm little, my knees don't quite come up high enough to tuck into, I think, where the bike's designed for them to tuck into. So that would be better, but I'm never uncomfortable. I do really love the torque and power curve of this bike too. It's not aggressive. It's something that, you know, your throttle's in control of. Very smooth. And I just love that pull, you know, right from probably about 3.5, 4 grand all the way up to almost red line. Overtaking is always fun. It's a lot of fun without being scared of it, I guess. I think the median age of owners of a SuperSport, at least based on a poll on the 939 forum, is somewhere in the kind of early 50s, which is exactly where I am. And I'm not sure if that is because it's a more expensive bike and maybe we kind of need to be a little bit on in years till we've got the spare funds to buy them, or whether it's just because it's still a sporty ride without being super uncomfortable. And it's a bike I can imagine I'll be riding for many, many years to come. So my dream is that I'll be riding this still in another 10 or 20 years at least. I've never been the kind of person to want to keep changing to new things all the time. My first WRX I had for well over 10 years, I think maybe even 15 years. And so therefore, one of the things I love about this SuperSport is just how familiar he is for me now. Like I love that feeling on days when I'm feeling good and the bike's always pretty much running good. It's just that feeling of oneness, like the bike is an extension of me, and it's going to sound a bit corny, but I almost feel like I'm home, you know, like I'm in a place that I just feel so comfortable and content and happy. I love that it's been the kind of bike that I've wanted to keep and wanted to get that familiar with. So it probably should be pretty obvious to you if you've made it this far through the video that I'm keeping him. I cannot think of another bike I would rather have or rather ride while ever I could be riding Bo. But of course this is just one person's experience with this bike. I just hope that I've shared enough of my experience with you that it helps you either, if you're in the market for one, it helps you make your decision to get one, or if you're a relatively new owner of a SuperSport, that you can better appreciate what you're in for potentially, and why it might be worth really getting to know the bike and making it fit you and making it really yours. There are plenty of bikes that would have fewer niggles, I imagine, but I can't imagine a single bike that would have as much soul as the Ducati SuperSport. If you'd like to ask me any more questions about my experience with this bike, because I'm certainly no expert on everything about this bike, I'm more than happy to share what I have learned and what I know, so ask away in the comments. And until next time, happy riding.